So real quick before I begin, I've been making a lot less gaming videos lately. So I do work outside of making videos, and I've been working in quite a few hours. I've been noticing that I've been getting less and less views on my gaming videos. And it's a little disappointing because I have over 30,000 subscribers. The last video I made took me about 3 weeks, and I only got 1,000 views. I do appreciate the feedback. If you would like to participate and share with my gaming channel with other people, that is awesome. I do appreciate that. The following is a Gaming Palooza Empire special presentation. This video may contain mature language and graphic content. Back in the late 70s and 80s, SNK designed arcade games which became quite popular around the world. Eventually, SNK started developing and publishing gaming console games for the NES. After getting a taste of the NES gaming console, they decided to create their own gaming console. In 1990, SNK introduced the Neo Geo gaming console for a whopping $650, which is way more than $1,000 in today's money. That's a lot of money. What the hell? The controllers were massive, and the game cartridges were huge. And the games actually costed over $200 per game. SNK refused to call their console 16-bit and referred to it as a 24-bit console. So guess what? It's 8-bit better than the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. Or is it? Let's find out. So right here we have a little bit of a demonstration of the Neo Geo versus the Super Nintendo. And at the top you can see the speculation differences between both consoles. The Neo Geo obviously had a better processor and more RAM, more video RAM. And you can see right here, there's a portion of the game that was not in Super Nintendo during the introduction. And this is the title screen right here. And they look pretty close to the same. Now this is where you see a slight difference. The colors on the Super Nintendo appear to be more washed out. Nonetheless, the detail does pretty much look pretty close to the same. The character models look pretty close to the same as well. We have our best players screen right here, and this is actually a little side-by-side comparison of the character model. And as you can see there, they do look pretty close to the same. And pretty interesting. I actually like the Super Nintendo version of that character better. Now right here we have the Sega Genesis version of the same exact game. We're going to do another side-by-side comparison. At the top, you can see that the processor on the Genesis matches the Neo Geo closer to the actual real thing versus the Super Nintendo's much powerful processor. And we have the title screen. They look pretty almost identical. And check that out. As you can see here, this is probably not the same exact map, but you can tell that the colors are not washed out on the Genesis version. It looks more native towards what the original game was. It looks a lot more loyal to the original Neo Geo version of the game. And we have the best player screen. And here's another example of the character model right here. And it looks very, very close to the original. Was it really worth paying that much more for the Neo Geo? Who knows? I guess if you want the real arcade experience, it's worth it. And here we have a little bit of a comparison between the Neo Geo and the Super Nintendo with the game World Heroes. It's definitely one of my favorite SNK games. I definitely have both the Super Nintendo and Genesis version of the game. Definitely cannot afford the Neo Geo version of the game, so let's check out the comparison right here. The title screens look pretty close. See the Neo Geo on this portion of the game right here looks definitely more detailed. The select screen looks similar, not quite the same. And right here, the mode select screen look quite similar. And here's the bonus portion of the game right here. You get to beat up a boulder. And you can tell the sprites on the Super Nintendo version are smaller. Nonetheless, it actually plays quite well, and it looks good enough for Super Nintendo standards. To be quite honest, the Super Nintendo version of this game is definitely my favorite. The controls are excellent. did a good job porting the game over to Super Nintendo, and the Neo Geo version does have more details, more animation, as you can see there. And let's check out what an actual match looks like in this game. You can still see in the Super Nintendo version all the people in the background waving their hands around, and it's actually pretty good. Now, as you can see on the ground on the Neo Geo version, the actual words deathmatch is illuminating, like from bright to dark. On the Super Nintendo version, you really don't see that well. It kind of does it, but not quite. So the Super Nintendo does have its limitations. Nonetheless, it does play perfectly fine. It's actually a great game on the Super Nintendo. Great alternative to Street Fighter 2. But you can clearly see the difference between both the Neo Geo and the Super Nintendo version. But would you rather pay $50 for the Super Nintendo version, or the $200 or whatever? However, it may cost more than $200. Would you be willing to pay that much more for the Neo Geo version of the game? That's the question. Personally, for me, I'm not seeing really that much big of a difference to even want to pay that much more. And here we have the Neo Geo versus the Sega Genesis, the same exact game. And you can see the title screens right here, and see what we got going on here. See if we can fix this. So here we go. We have a side-by-side comparison of this portion of the game right here. It looks a little bit closer to the same. Now the select screen looks very different. The Genesis version looks like a bit of a sloppy port for some reason. And you can see in this portion of the game, the people in the background don't move quite as much as the SNES version of the game. But the game still looks very good on the Sega Genesis. It looks like it was definitely modified in the background, like they kind of changed it up a little bit. The deathmatch words on the mat do not blink. They just kind of stay one shade of color, which is perfectly fine. Some people may prefer the Genesis controller for this style of game, a fighting game. I personally like the SNES version better, but I do love the Sega Genesis better in general, especially for fighting games. Call me crazy, but it kind of looks like the crowd has more detail on the Genesis version. Now, as you can see here, the Neo Geo had a lot of games that appeared on 16-bit consoles, Sega Genesis, and Super Nintendo. But that goes to show you, like, is the Neo Geo worth purchasing back in the day? I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, you can buy both the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis for the same price. So the combination of having to own a 16-bit console and eventually going out and buying a 32-bit console, I mean, you're still able to buy Neo Geo games on either console that you buy, the PlayStation or the Sega Saturn. And it may be around the same price, so go figure. The Sega Saturn did cost quite a bit, though, so I'm not sure about that. But Sega Saturn was the ultimate 2D console. It could probably play anything that was on the Neo Geo. That's the reason why there was a lot of King of Fighter games on that console. Ultimately, I guess if you were into arcade perfection, the Neo Geo had the joystick. It had literally the hardware built into the huge cartridges that it had. So if you wanted the real thing, then yeah, then it will be worth buying the Neo Geo console. But yeah, what do you think? Is the Neo Geo console really worth purchasing back in the day? Or would you swing towards buying the Genesis, the Super Nintendo, and then eventually buying the Saturn or the PlayStation? Which way would you swing? Buying the $600 and something console Neo Geo, or buying the other consoles? Because you can literally buy all of them for the same price. Let me know down below.